How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yud Ches, Daf 18 of Masechta Shevuos. Friends, your friends. Okay, today's Daf is awkward. I haven't really made a plan yet for how I'm going to navigate the awkward concepts. I think I have an idea for 2 out of 3 of them. I don't yet have an idea for the third one. So I'll just have to figure out how to navigate it as we go. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to start on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. At the 2 dots, about 15-20 lines from the bottom. I'd say maybe 60% of the way down Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. The reason why I am starting here is because I just figure we'll just do the entire topic all at once. Okay, here we go. We're going to start on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, as I said, about 60% on the page, 15-20 lines from the bottom, 2 dots. Zoi hi mitzvahs esei shebamikdash she'ein chayaven alea v'chulei. Okay, so the Mishnah had said, after describing becoming tamei in the Beis Hamikdash and how you got to get out of there, and if you get out of there quickly, so then you will not be chayiv a korban olav yored, you'll be potter. So zohi mitzvahs esei shebamikdash she'ein chayaven alea. So this is, if you get out on time, this is a example of mitzvahs esei in the Beis Hamikdash. Why is it an esei? Because vishalchu min hamachne, that if you become tamei in the Beis Hamikdash, so get out. And so long as you get out efficiently, so you will not have to offer a korban olav yored. Frekt de Gemara, heichi kai de kamer zoi hi. It's kind of a random, it's kind of a strange statement of the Mishnah. Zoi hi, what did we say? Zoi mitzvahs esei shebamikdash she'ein chayaven alea. This is the mitzvahs esei in the Beis Hamikdash she'ein chayav. What it feels like we're missing some context here. So Hasam Koi, okay, so let's go weiter for a second. Hasam Koi, it's a reference to, or it relates to, I guess maybe a Mishnah or a Gemara in Horayos, Masechta Horayos. I think I've mentioned, so first of all, Masechta Horayos is coming up, Taka. After Masechta Shevuos, we have Masechta Avodah Zarah, and then Masechta Horayos. Masechta Horayos is only 14 pages. And I think I've mentioned in the past, Masechta Horayos is a very symbolic, it's very important Masechta in our family, because whenever it came to Masechta Horayos, that was when Zeta made a Siyam Hashas. He started learning Daf Yomi, I guess either with Horayos or with Avodah Zarah, or maybe Zvachim, I don't know exactly how. Maybe he started with Zvachim, so whenever they made a Siyum on Horayos, so he made a Siyum on Shas. Maybe that's what it was. But anyways, Masechta Horayos. So I don't know if he started with Zvachim or with Horayos, but Horayos was always for us. That was a Horayos. That was when we got to Horayos, that's when Zeta makes a Siyum Shas at Horayos. Anyways, what does Horayos talk about? So Be'etzem, I don't know much about Horayos. I mean, I feel like there isn't that much to know about it. The whole Masechta is only 14 pages, but Be'etzem it talks about Parilim Davar Shel Tzibur, right? That when the Sanhedrin makes a mistake and they paskin regarding something shechayaven al zidono kares val shigagoso chatos. So, for example, if they paskin that something is not avodah zarah, but then they say, "Oops, actually it is avodah zarah." So they have to bring a par helam davar shel tzibur. It's a special korban that they bring. So now, so this is a reference to Masechta Horayos, where it says, "Ein chayovin al esei ve'al lo saisei sheba mikdash," that the Sanhedrin would not be chayav to bring a par helam davar shel tzibur if they made a mistake regarding tumas mikdash v'kadashav. If they made a mistake, if they paskined incorrectly regarding tumas mikdash v'kadashav, they would not need to bring a Parlam Davar Shel Tzibor, because Parlam Davar Shel Tzibor is for something that you'd be chayiv al shigigaso chatos, whereas by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav, as we know, it would be a korban olav yored, not a korban chatas. Therefore, there would be no Parlam Davar Shel Tzibor by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav. Ve'in mevin Ashram Talui al Esev Alosai Sheb Mikdash. Also, if there was a suffix chiyuv kares, if there was a suffix by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav, so there also would not be an Ashram Tali. I don't know that much about Ashram Talis, but of course, as we know, Seder Kodshim is just around the corner. By the end of the year, we'll already be learning Seder Kodshim, so hopefully I will know more about Ashram Talis at some point in the not so distant future. But Be'etzim Ashram Talis is like when we learned about it the other day, right? For example, if you have two pieces of chaylev, two pieces of fat, right, and you find out and you eat one of them, you find out after the fact that one of them was chaylev. You have two pieces of fat, you eat one of them, you find out later that one of them was chaylev, one of them was shuman, one of them was you're not allowed to eat, one of them you are allowed to eat, but you don't know. It's possible that you ate the shuman, in which case you don't have to do anything at all. It's possible that you ate the chaylev by accident, in which case you have to bring a korban chatas. But you're not sure, so therefore you bring an asham tali. So there's no asham tali when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash, also because again, this is korban ole v'yored. This isn't something that you would bring a korban chatas for. 1 second. Yeah, where are we? Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, fine. And this is a korban olav yored. Aval, but they say in Horius, Aval chayovin al esei v'alosaisa shebenida. But you are chayav korban chatas for mitzvahs esei v'alosaisa shebenida when it comes to nida. Umivin ashram talui. And they also bring in Ashram Talui for essay and Lesaise Shebanida V'Ka'amar. And now what our Mishnah is saying is it's a reference to Harius, and we're saying here in our Mishnah, Zohi mitzvahs essay Sheba Mikdash. So here is the mitzvahs essay when it comes to the Beis Hamikdash. Right? In Harius they said, right, Ein Chayavin al essay v'Lesaise Shebamikdash. So here is the essay Shebamikdash she'ein chayavin aleh, that you are not chayav for. Right? We explained with right, if you become tummy and you get out of there. Ve'ezohi mitzvahs esei shebenida shechayavin aleh. And what is mitzvahs esei by nida that you're chayav for? So there's so the Mishnah lists a similar situation. To the Beis Hamikdash by nida, right? What happens to the Beis Hamikdash? You're in the Beis Hamikdash and you become tummy, so you have to get out of the Beis Hamikdash. So we say if you get out fast enough, so then you are potter from having to bring a korban. Masha ein kain by nida. What's this case? The case of what does the Gemara? What does the Gemara say? You had a person who was having bia with a fellow was having bia with a fella, and she was tahora at the time. But then, while he's inside of her, ve'amerlo nitmesi, she says, "Now I am tameya." So now what happens? Because he's inside of her, she's now tameya. So he says, "Uferish miyad chayiv." If he immediately pulls out, so then he's going to be chayiv p'nei shitziyaso anoalo kibiyaso, because the yitzia, or I think the Gemara is going to use the word prisha, so we're going to have to make like words to reference things, because I don't want to. Yeah, it's just it's nice to just, when it comes to sensitive things like this, to be able to just use like technical terms, and you can kind of deal with the technical terms in terms of the more sort of touchy kind of terms. Anyways, informative kind of terms. Akaponim. So basically, he's in a bind because he's inside of her. She's now a nida. If he immediately pulls out while he's still erect, so then that would be, he would still be in a position of like hana'ah, of getting hana'ah, and pulling out would ochid be hana'ah, and you don't want to get hana'ah for being bol and nida. So therefore, we say what you should do is wait. Okay, wait, and then what's the best way? What's the best word for this? Wait. I don't. Well, how do I? Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really thought about, because it's going to come up on the daf. We need to get vocabulary for this. I don't know. What's a word that we should use throughout the daf? I feel like flaccid. I feel like flaccid is like a very weird word. Is there a better word for? Is there a better alternative to flaccid? I don't think there is. However, we're just going with flaccid. No, it's just too weird of a word. I don't have an alternative. I don't. Wait until you soften up. Wait until you. I don't know. I don't know what word to use that isn't awkward. Wait until you soften up. Okay. I think we're just going to go with soften up. I think it's less awkward than flaccid. Okay, so you're inside a nida, and now you're kind of stuck, because if you just pull out immediately, so we're going to call that prisha, okay? We're going to call that prisha. Pulling out immediately is prisha. So, and going in, penetrating, is going to be knisa, right? Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. Okay. So he's inside of her, so he can't just be poresh immediately. Rather, he's got to wait till he softens up, and that way there will be less hana for him. And if you, whereas by the Beis Hamikdash, when you become tameh in the Beis Hamikdash, so if you immediately leave, you are going to be potter. It's actually the opposite, where you would be chayiv actually for the same scenario with being boil, right, with Anida, and she tells you she was tahora initially, but then while the fellow is inside the fella, she says, I'm Anida. So now actually the opposite is true. If he pulls out immediately, so then he will be chayiv. Rather, what he needs to do is he needs to soften up, and then there will be less ana, and you will be patur that way. Okay. Itmar, it was stated. Abaye Omer says, Abaye Mishmei de Reb Chia bar Rav. Okay, Itmar Abaye Omer Mishmei de Reb Chia bar Rav. So Abaye says, name of Reb Chia bar Rav, Chayav Shtayim. Okay, so our fellow is going to be Chayav twice. V'chein Omer Rave, by 2 korban chatases. V'chein Omer Rave, Omer Rav Shmuel bar Shiva, Omer Rav Huna, Chayav Shtayim, and similarly, Rav Amar of Shmuel bar Shiva says also Chayav Shtayim is going to be Chayav 2 korban chatases. Chada aknisa, one for knisa, one for penetrate, one for going in. V'chada aprisha, and one for going out. Haviba, it says Rabba. There's different cases. It says Rava. I'll just say Rava. Fine. Haviba Rava. Rava, however, asks a question. B'mai, what is this scenario where our fellow would be chayiv 2 korban chatases, one for knisa and one for prisha? If we're talking about a talmid chacham, okay, so bishlama knisa li chayiv. Where am I? B'mai. I'm sorry, I skipped some important words. So b'mai ilem samuch levesta. So if we're talking about samuch levesta, right? So the fella, right? You have a fella and a fella, right? Let's say they're a married couple. Let's assume that they're a married couple. So it's the wife's veset kilu. She knows that she's gonna, right? She knows that there's a high likelihood that she's gonna be a nida at this particular time. The fellow takes his chances, and right. So it's samach levesta. It's around the time that she becomes a nida. And the fellow takes his chances, and he says, I think I'll be able to chaparine and get in, get out. She'll still be tehora. But his gamble did not work out. and while he was inside of her, she became a nida. So if we're talking about samuch levesta, it's around the time of her veset, when she normally becomes a nida. Uveman, who we're talking about, ilim tamar chacham. If we're talking about a tamar chacham, now a tamar chacham should know better, because there's a halacha that we're going to learn on Yud Ches Amud Beis, that, oh wow, it's already been 50 minutes, we're not even on today's daf. I'm a little bit nervous that the I'm actually going to run out of battery on the camera, because it wasn't full. It's at like 94%. Sometimes in the long dafs, also I've been using this same camera for like 5 years. It's getting a little bit, the battery's not as strong as it used to be. We'll see. If it runs out of battery, I'll go upon him. So if he's a Talmud Chacham, he should have known better, because as we're going to learn on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, right there, there's what does it say? Yud Ches Amud Beis, Mekan Azhara Lebnei Yisrael Sheyifreshu Min Shosein Tzamach Levesta. That there is that there's a mitzvah to not have bia right around the time of the veset. So therefore, you should have known better. Okay, so v'ilem b'tamud chacham. So bishlama aknisa lichayev kasav yuchalani livol el aprisha amay lichayev mezidhu. But we're saying that he's chayev 2 korban chatases. Now, for a korban to be chayev a korban chatas, you chayev a korban chatas for shogeg, for accidental. You are not chayev a korban chatas for ones, and you are not chayev a korban chatas for mezid. Okay, only for shogeg. So now, we're saying that this fellow is chayiv 2 korban chatases. Now, if we're talking about samuch levesta, and he's a Talmud Chacham, so you should have known better regarding the knisa already. He shouldn't have been having bia with his wife, with samuch levesta, and he took the gamble. He thought he can get in and out quick. It didn't. The gamble did not work out, and so therefore, okay, so it's not onus, because he knew he shouldn't have been doing it. It's not mazid. She wasn't a nida at the time. He thought he'd be able to get in and out. So it's shogeg. So therefore, he's chayav a korban chatas when it comes to the knisa. But in terms of the yitzia, if he's a Talmud Chacham and he knows that he should not be pulling out right away, he knows that he should wait until it softens up. But he pulled out right away anyways. So he's mazid for that. He's not chayav a korban chata. He's mazid there. V'i b'ama oretz, and if we're talking about an ama oretz, and therefore the ama oretz didn't know about this halacha, and therefore it was onus. The ama oretz didn't realize that he was doing anything wrong. Right? She was tahara at the time. So therefore, I'm sorry. So therefore, it's shogeg. It's shogeg on both of them. I'm sorry. So in Amma Aretz, it's going to be shogeg for both of them, right? Keilu, right. There's a mitzvah that he shouldn't be having bia with his wife samuch levesta, and he did it. He didn't realize. So it's shogeg. And also in terms of pulling out, he didn't know about that halacha either. So you're shogeg there too. So okay, so I understand. So it's 2 shogeg. So okay, but the thing is, there's a halacha, if by accident you eat 2 pieces of chaylev, right? If we go back to our example of chaylev before, or fat before, you have 2 pieces of fat. So in our example before, by the Ashim Tali, one of them is chaylev, one of them is shuman, you don't know which one you ate. But over here, it's talking about where they were both chaylev, and you ate both of them, but you didn't realize at the time. So you'd only have to bring 1 korban chatas, because you ate 2 pieces of chaylev, but it was behelam echad, it was in 1 lapse, right? So therefore it's only 1 korban chatas. So here as well, if he had bia with his wife, samuch levesta, and she became a nida in the middle. So now he has to bring a korban for the knisa and a korban for the yitzia, but he didn't know in the middle that he did anything wrong, right? Because he didn't know about the halacha that he wasn't supposed to be having bia with his wife. So there was no kind of yediyah at any point. So it's considered he basically is chayiv 2 chatases, but behelam echad, so he should only have to bring 1 korban chatas. So again, what's the scenario where there would be a chiyuv of 2 korban chatases? So ve'ela b'she'ein samuch levesta. Okay, so maybe let's suggest that it's ein samuch levesta, that it was not close to when she normally becomes a nida, and therefore, they were just having bia, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she says, "I'm a nida." Well, he's definitely then not chayav for the knisa, because that's completely ones. Right? There was no reason to assume that you'd become a nida right now. So again, Uchman, If we're talking about a Talmud Chacham, well then velo chada lo mechayiv. You shouldn't be mechayiv at all. If he's a Talmud Chacham, which means, well, for the Knisa there's nothing to be chayiv for because it was completely onus. It's not b'shas vesta. And if it is, and in terms of the pulling out, well, that's mazid because he knows he shouldn't have pulled out right away. So he's onus on the Knisa and he's mazid on the Prisha. There's no korban chatas at all. A Knisa onus, a Prisha mazid. So for the Knisa is onus, and it was onus, and the Prisha was mazid. So there's no korban chatas at all. Iba ama aretz, chada would mechayiv. And ama aretz would mechayiv only one korban chatas because again the Knisa is still onus. In terms of the Prisha, he didn't know, so he's chayiv korban chatas for that. But again, only one, not two. A Prisha, korban chada, iba ama aretz chada would mechayiv a Prisha only for Prisha. Hadar Amar Rava. Rava then said though, le'olam b'samuch levesta v'tamul chacham. Rather, okay, so it is talking about samuch levesta. Okay, and we're talking about a Talmud Chacham v'Talmud Chacham lazu ve'in Talmud Chacham lazu. But interestingly, he was only half a Talmud Chacham. He knew about the halacha that you're not supposed to sleep with your wife samuch levesta, and therefore he knew that he was taking a gamble, and so he's chayva. So he's shogeg there. He's chayva korban chatas for that. However, he didn't know this halacha about pulling out. And he was shogeg on that. So he was shogeg both on the Knisa and on the Prisha because he didn't know that halacha about pulling out. And it's not behelim echad because when his wife told him, right, when he was inside of her, I'm a nida now. So then he says, don't, dag nabbit, I knew I shouldn't have done this. So there was a yediyah in the middle. So it's not behelim echad, right? Meaning when she became a nida, he realized like, okay, I'm chayav a korban chatas. He was aware that he's chayav a korban chatas for that. And then when he pulls out, he's and when he didn't know about that was a problem that he has to wait to soften up. So then he is going to be chayav a separate korban chatas for that. Omar Rava says Rava v'tarvayu taninu, and both are taught in Mishnais Knisa Tanina, Prisha Tanina. We learned both about the Knisa and the Prisha. Prisha Tanina, so talking about the Prisha, how you shouldn't pull out right away, that's in our Mishnah. The Katani, Hoye Mishamish, Imatahora, that if you have a fellow who's having bia with a fella, she's Tahora, and she says to him, Nitmesi, that I am now Tmeya. Okay, Uferish Miyad Chayev, and he pulls out immediately. We said that he's Chayev for that. So we have a Mishnah therefore. So our Mishnah talks about being Chayev for Prisha, for being Porish Miyad. Okay, and Knisa Tanina, and we also have a Mishnah talking about a Chayev for Knisa Samuch Levesta. That this is from, I don't know if it's from Nida or from Kresos. Nimtza al Shelo Tmeim v'chayim kavim ma'ala b'samach levesa. Right. Okay. Great. So yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Fine. So Knisa Tanina Nimtza al Shelo. So basically, if after having bia, he is cleaning himself up and he's using some kind of cloth, and he sees that there's dam. He sees that there's dam. So nimsa al shalo, if he sees on his cloth that he's cleaning himself up with that there's some blood, so tamein, so they are both tamein. Okay, they are both tamein, and v'chayovim b'korban, and they have to bring a korban chatas, because that means that memele when he was that when they were having bia, she was a nida, whether she was nida before or during bia, whatever it is. So basically had bia with a nida. They both have to bring a korban chatos ma'alav b'samuch levesta v'aknisa. Let's assume that it's talking about where it was samuch levesta, and therefore, and for knisa, right, the fact that he had bia with her samuch levesta, so he has to bring a korban chatas for that because it was shogeg. Okay, so we have a Mishnah for that as well. Amalei Rav Ada bar Masna l'Rava, but Rav Ada bar Masna says to Rava, but wait, maybe I'll say la'olam emalach b'shelo samuch levesta. Wait, but maybe I will say where it's shelo samuch levesta, that it was not samuch levesta and it was completely out of nowhere that she became a nida. Ve'aprisha, and we're saying that then while they're having bia, she says I'm a nida, and then he pulls out and he's chayiv a korban for that. So maybe it's talking about prisha. Maybe it's not talking about knisa. V'chitema prisha lamali hatanale. And if you're going to say, wait, but why do I need another Mishnah telling me about prisha? Our Mishnah here in Shevuos already talks about prisha. Well, ha'itzrich lashmu'inon. Well, ha'itzrich lashmu'inon nimtza al shelah tmeim besafek ufturin min hakorban. Well, because the Mishnah there in Nida had to teach that if the dam is found on her cloth, well then they are only safek tmeim, and they don't have to bring a korban, because maybe if she finds it later on her cloth, well then maybe she became a nida after the fact. So because we had to teach that if she finds it on her cloth, so actually it depends. If it's later on, so then they're safek nidas, and they don't have to bring a korban because maybe it happened later. But if she finds it immediately after that bia, well then she was. We can assume that she was a nida while they were having bia, and they would have to be korbanos. So because we had to teach that case of when it's on her cloth, so adi v'deboy misna nimtza al shelah, tananami nimtza al shelo. So you can argue that it is talking about prisha. So then why do we have to talk about prisha there in nida if we already talk about prisha here? Well, because over there we have to talk about when she finds it on her cloth. So therefore they also talk about when he finds it on his cloth, but it could be talking about prisha. So Omar le Ravina the Rav Ada, but Ravina says to Rav Ada, Mimotzis leukma leahi bishalo samuch levesta v'aprisha. But Ravina asks Rav Ada, is that really true? Can you really say that the Mishnah is talking about not samuch levesta, and where it came as a total surprise, and what the korban is for prisha, for pulling out? V'animtza katani. But it says if it was found, implying that it was found later on. Where am I? Nimtza katani. V'nimtza lebasar achi mashma. And nimtza implies later on the dam is found via prisha. And if we're talking about prisha, where it was not samuch levesta, and she tells him in the middle, I'm a nida now, and then he pulls out right away and he's chayiv for that. Meikar ki parish le, skip this word, havya le yedia. Well then, immediately when he pulled out, they already knew then. There was nothing to discover later on, right? And it says that if it's discovered later on, so then, if she discovers later on, so then, or what did he even say by him as well? Nimtza al shalo. Right, and then it says also nimtza al shelah. So nimtza, it was found. That means at a later point. Whereas if we're talking about she already knows while they're having bias, so then there's nothing to be found out. So therefore, it must be rather that it's talking about samuch levesta and on knisa, and they find out, and later on they find out, and then we're saying if he finds out on his cloth, so then they have to bring korbanis. So Omar lei. Rave Tzayis Madikam Rabach, and Rave says to Rav, who is this? Rav Ada something? Rav Ada bar Masna. So Rave says to Rav Ada bar Masna, listen to what your Rebbe Ravina is saying. But how can I listen to what my Rebbe Ravina is saying? The Tanya, Allah, because it was taught in a brisa on regarding that Mishnah. Zohi mitzvahs essay shebenidish chayavin Allah. That this is a mitzvah's essay by nida that you're chayiv for. Now, vim isa, if it's true that it's talking about samuch levesta, right, and that they find after the fact that she was a nida, well then this isn't an essay, it's a lo taseh. Right? I mean, he shouldn't have been having bia with her. Right? So, but over here we're saying there's a mitzvah's essay. The mitzvah's essay is saying, is when you find out while you're having bia, and we're saying, go out slowly. That's the mitzvah's essay, which means that we're talking about prisha, not talking about knisa. Knisa would be mitzvah's los asay, don't have bia. Right? Ve'im isa mitzvah's lo ta'aseh. If you're right that it's talking about knisa, well then the violation was a lo ta'aseh of don't be having bia right now. So Omar le itanisa chaser usniachi. Rava says, okay, that's a fine point, but to your point, teach the brisa the following way. Zohi mitzvahs lo ta'aseh shebenida. That this is a mitzvahs lo ta'aseh. Meaning chasur mechsav achiktanik. Add the following words, that this is a mitzvahs lo ta'aseh shebenida, i.e. you shouldn't be having bia in this scenario. Shechayavin aleh, that you are chayiv for, and additionally, hay mishamish matahora ve'amar lo nitmesi uferish miyad chayiv zoy mitzvahs eseh shebenida chulei. And additionally, in the scenario where they're having bia, and then she says, "I am tameya," and he pulls out immediately, he's chayiv for that, because the scenario there is that he needs to pull out slowly, he has to soften up and pull out slowly, and if he doesn't do that, then he's going to be chayiv for that, and that would be an essay that you'd be chayiv for pulling out the wrong way. Zoy. Omar Mar, we said earlier, perish miyad chayiv hechiyavid. Okay, so as maybe people are wondering that, okay, so we said that if you pull out immediately, you are chayiv hechiyavid. So what are you supposed to do? Amravuna mishmei de. So it says Rava, but that wouldn't make sense. There's a different case that says Rav, which does make sense. So Amravuna mishmei de Rav. Noy eitz eser tziparn of bekarke. Well, you stick your 10 fingers into the ground and ad sheyamus, until you soften up. Vituve, and good on you. Vituvya, I assume it's saying vituvya, and good on you. I assume it's saying vituvya. Let me see, is there, where am I? Let me see if I can see. I just assumed that it was vituvya. Is it? Oh no, it's not vituvya. Vituve, and good on you. I thought it was, I thought it was like, I don't know, tuvya, like Bob's your uncle. Oh, okay. Oh, vituve, okay, and good on you. Rava is also meres a mishamish meis ba'arayis potter. So now Rava wants to conclude from here that mishamish meis ba'arayis is potter. That if somebody sleeps with a nida, with arayis, okay, nida's arayis. So if somebody sleeps with a nida, let's say, and he is meis, kilu, he's soft, he's not erect, he's soft, that should be okay, right? Because we're saying here, soften up and get out. Apparently, softening up is acceptable. So this agadaite chayev achamai time of potter. Because if you say that you're chayev for having bia with arayis when you are soft, well then, if you're chayev for that, then why are we suggesting to soften up and then exit? Why are we saying that you'd be potter for that? Mishum de anus hu ki perish mi'anami niftar. Because if you're going to say that you're chayev for being when you're soft, well then you say, well then why are you patir? Well, because he's ones, right? They were having bia, and then she said she's a nida. So, but if we're saying ones, well then say the same thing. But if we're saying that you're chayiv for being soft, and the reason why you're patir is because of ones, well then you're also chayiv for being hard, and you should also be patir for ones. So Amalei Abaye, so Abaye responds to him and says, no, actually I can argue that you're chayiv for when you're soft as well. Okay, so what's the difference between being soft and being hard? So Lolam Eimalach, Hamishamesh Meis Barayis Chayiv. Really, I'll tell you, being soft also you're chayiv for. V'ocha my time of potter. Why are you potter here when you're soft? Mishum de onusu, because he's onus. V'hai de omad kiparish miyada my chayiv. If you're going to say, well, okay, so you're potter for being onus, right? That there's nothing you can do about the scenario at this point. So then you should also be potter for being hard as well. If when you're hard as well. So well, the difference is that there is less hana'a when soft rather than when hard. And therefore, there is ones in both cases. The thing is, you can minimize the amount of hana'a that you're getting from having bia with a nida, and therefore you should do that. And if you minimize the hana'a by softening up, so then you will be putter. But if you pull right out, you will be chayiv. Amalei Rabba bar Chanon le Abaye, says Rabba bar Chanon to Abaye, Imkein matzinu arucho ktsar benida. Oh, so in Rabba bar Chanon says to Abaye, if that's the case, so we also see a long a long route and a short route when it comes to nida as well. Vanun b'mikdash tanan, and we had that by mikdash as well, right? Meaning by mikdash in the Mishnah when it was talking about the Beis Hamikdash, so it says if you become tamei in the Beis Hamikdash, so there was a difference. Did you take the direct route out or did you take the scenic route out? Right? We mentioned that in the Mishnah, right? Baruch chayiv b'ktsara pater. Well, if that's the case, we should say the same thing here by nida as well. That if you go Barucha, the long route, you're pater, right? If you wait to soften up, you're pater. If you take the Ktsara, the quick route out, when you're hard, so then chayiv. Wow, it's pretty awkward daf. I feel like I'm getting more used to it as the more awkward, the more you have to deal with it. I guess the more you get used to it. I don't know. I'll go upon him. Vana b'mikdash tanan. So Amalei, Abai responds to Rabbi Bar Chonin, Mishum delo dami arucha da'acha k'tzara da'acha k'tzara da'asam arucha da'asam k'tzara da'acha. So Abai says, yeah, but the thing is that they are opposites, right? By the Beis Hamikdash, you're supposed to take the short route. You're not supposed to take the long route. Here, you're supposed to take the long route to soften up. You're not supposed to take the short route. So therefore, we don't mention the short and long thing. Maskef Rav Huna Breder Rav Nasan, Rav Huna Breder Rav Nasan asked the question, Umi Amar Abaye Anusu. Can Abaye really explain that we're talking about a scenario here of ones, of lo samuch levesta, and that it's a scenario of ones? That means that we're talking about shelo samuch levesta, and there's a scenario of ones. She all of a sudden out of nowhere became a nida. But how could that be? But Abai is the one who said at the beginning of the daf that he's going to be chayiv 2 korban chatases, and we had said we said that that's talking about samuch levesta, and therefore he's chayiv chatas on the knisa and on the prisha. So that means talking about samuch levesta. We talk about a talmid chacham. He was a talmid chacham lazev, lo talmid chacham lazo. So kiyitmar da Abai ba'am itmar. Look, when Abai was talking about being chayiv twice, he wasn't talking about our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, where we're making the distinction between soft and hard, so then that is talking about when it's a situation of anus. Separately, Abaye says that in a situation of samuch levesta and a talmid chacham lazov, lo talmid chacham lazov, in that case, he will be chayiv to korban chatas. But that wasn't talking about our Mishnah per se. That was just talking about in general when it's samuch levesta. Okay. Givaldik. I think that we're done now with the awkward stuff, I think. Nice. Pamine Reb Yonasan ben Yosi ben Lekunya, mi Reb Shimon ben Yosi ben Lekunya, azhare leboyel nida minayin. Where do we have a warning in the Torah not to have bia with a nida? Where's the Torah say not to have bia with a nida? Shakol kala pasak bay. So Reb Shimon ben Yosi ben Lekunya took some mud and he chucked it at Reb Yonasan ben Yosi ben Lekunya. Asar the boil nida ve'elisha be nidas tumasa lo sikrav. What do you mean? The pasuk says. I think this is probably in this week. It's Friday. It's Parshas Achrei Mos Kedoshim. It's probably this week's parsha for me, not for you. But it says don't sleep with a nida. The pasuk says ve'elisha be nidas tumasa lo sikrav. Ella azhar lemeshamish imatahora ve'amr lo nitmesid lo nifresh miyad minol. No, rather, after he's covered in dirt, he says what I meant was, where does the Torah warn against the scenario where somebody's having bia and the fella becomes a nida, not to pull out immediately? So Amar Chizkiya Amar Kra, but usihi nidasa alav. Afilu b'shas nidasa, even when she is a nida, i.e. they're having bia and she says, I'm a nida now, tehei alav, she should remain connected, she should remain on him, he should remain in her. Don't exit immediately. Ashkan essay, usi nidasa alav. I guess we're not totally done with the awkward stuff. And it was a mitzvah essay, lo taisei min. Where do we say a lo taisei? Amar papa, amar kra, lo sikrav. Lo sikrav nami lo sifroshu. Lo sikrav, don't come close, could also mean don't separate. How do we know that tikrav could mean separate? Tichsev ha'omrim krav elecha. That meant separate yourself. Krav, in this elecha means separate yourself. Atigash bi ki kidashticha. Don't come close here because I'll make you tamei or something like that. Okay. Tanarbana v'zaytem has been Yisam tumasam. Amar Reb Yosha mikan azhara livnei Yisrael sheyifreshu minishosein samuch levestan. So from here, from v'zaytem has been Yisam tumasam, we have the azhara that husbands and wives that husbands should separate themselves from their wives close to their veset when they normally become nidas. V'chama amar rabba ona. The amount of time of an ona. So therefore, if the wife expects to become a nida that night, so then he should stay away from his wife. They should not be that entire night. If she expects to become a nida that day, so then they should not be that day. Amr Yochanan Mishum Reb Shimon Ben Yochai Kol She'eino Porish Meishto Samach Levesta. Somebody who does not do this, somebody who does not stay away from his wife, does not refrain from having bia Samach Levesta. Afilu Avilo Bonim Kivnei Aharon, even if they have sons like the sons of Aharon, Nadav and Avihu, Mesim, they are going to die. Dichsev Vizaitem es Bnei Yisrael Mitumasam Ve'adova Bnei Dosa V'Samach Le Achrei Mos, and then after that you have Achrei Mos Shnei Bnei Aharon. Amareb Chia Bar Abba Amareb Yochanan Kol Porish Meishto Samach Levesta. Somebody who does refrain from having bia Samach Levesta. Havin Lo Banim Zchar. You can have boys. Tichsiv Lahavdil Ben Atome Uven Atar, to separate Ben Atome Uven Atar. V'Samach Le Isha Ki Tazuya V'Yolda Zachar. You have a boy. Rabbi Yeshua Ben Levi Omar Havin Lo Banim Ruin Lahora. You can have sons that are fit to be poskim. I think the point is that, just like we had this comparison between lahavdil and boys, so also lahavdil u'lehoros, that they'll become poiskim. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba Reb Yochanan kol amavdil ala yain b'motzoi Shabbosis. Somebody who says havdalah on wine on Motzei Shabbos. Havyon loy banim zcharim is going to have boys. Tichsiv lahavdil ben hakodesh uben achol. Separate between the kodesh achol. Tichsiv asam lahavdil ben atome uben atar. That second pasuk of right, so the house between a kodesh and a chol, so between kodesh and chol, and also that's in the context of that and then the next pasuk, the havdil ben atami ben atar, that is by is where the Torah talks about that the kohanim should not drink wine. So I think maybe you can say that adds the context of wine and havdalah ben kodesh chol. So v'samach le'isha ki sazriya, and then shortly after that is isha ki sazriya, and have a boy. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Omar banim ru'in la'ora dichsiv lahavdil u'lehoros. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says also there will be poiskim because of lahavdil u'lehoros. Amar Binyamin bar Yefes Amar Balazo kol mekadesh shasman b'shas tashmish. Anybody who's tsanua b'shas tashmish having lo banim zcharim will have boys. Shenemar v'искadeshtem v'isem kedoshim, be holy. V'samach le'isha ki sazriya, and then you have isha ki sazriya chever. That was an interesting Daf Yud Ches, Masechta Shevuos. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.